Well, Sheena, do you want to do the intro like you usually do? And then we'll.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Shayna. And we just want to do a few housekeeping rules. Remember, if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat box or you can raise your hand. If everyone could please stay on mute so we don't have any distracting background noise. I've also put the caption link within the chat box. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Sheena. And I will call on you to advance the slides since I'm used to facilitating, but not facilitating and speaking at the same time. So multitasking online is something I need all the help I can get with. So thanks for advancing the slides. And I'll introduce myself. So next slide. Okay. Wow, that picture has the same shirt I'm wearing. How convenient. I'm June Kales, and I'm usually the host of these calls, but today I am speaking. I am a white woman wearing black glasses and a blue casual shirt. I'm adjusting to my black and brown and gray and white hair, and I'm in my impossible to keep clean office. And I'm purposely, not shamefully, displaying any of the latest books that I have not written. So I'm based in LA, and my work over many years has focused on disability practice competencies and capabilities in both healthcare and in emergency services, converting the laws and the regulations into the details, the sustainable building blocks and tools that hopefully close service gaps, prevent civil rights violations, and operationalize equity and deliver equally effective services. Next slide. So today, I want to cover a project that I've been working on for the year related to health plans and their member-centered emergency practices. I'm going to cover the project. What's in this for you? Why should you care? The project's activities and a subsequent report that you'll be able to get, and policy change opportunities. So I will speak for about 30 minutes of content, but it's fine to put your questions and comments in chat. Don't wait to ask them later, put them in there, and Trina, I'll ask you to interrupt me from time to time just to narrate what's in the chat and to alert me of questions. So again, you don't have to wait to the end to put your comments and questions in chat.
Great, will do.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide. So this project had beginning seed money over the last 2-3 years from Centene Corporation, Anthem, and the Inland Empire Health Plan. But major funding came over the last year from the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation, and that grant went to the World Institute on Disability. Next slide. So why health plans? Why focus on this? After all, in disability rights and in independent living, our core values are all about social and not that medical model. Well, the reason is We live in times when disasters have moved from periodic experiences to really chronic conditions. And those adjectives like unprecedented and historic, they kind of sound trite and overused disaster descriptors. So first, I'm really connecting the dots in terms of my own experience from me, because I worked as a contractor for over 2 decades with health plans. And I know that they actually touch and serve more people with disabilities than any other service system. And thus, they're really an under-recognized and underutilized resource as an essential partner in protecting the health and safety and independence of members before, during, and after emergencies, and preventing or lessening the worsening of what are typically well-controlled chronic health conditions during non-emergency times. Health plans, their response can really impact positive health and safety outcomes. And just a note for all of you representing community organizations, none of this content lets your organization off the hook for parallel emergency planning, response, and recovery activities with the people you support. I think what's really important is that health plans can actually do more easily what we as community organizations struggle to do in emergencies for people with disabilities. We can't do it alone, and we need this partnership. So next slide. The purpose of this project is to investigate in detail good interventions and advocate for the embedding of strong critical processes into member-centered emergency services, applying the past lessons of COVID and other co-occurring and previous emergencies. So again, it's embedding and sustaining these practices so that members can better cope with, live through, and survive these events. It's also so that these practices aren't lost and don't have to be reinvented every time there's a new emergency. So just a note, for this project, health plans refer to health insurance plans across all lines of business, public as well as private. So the audience for this project is pretty broad. Next slide. They're health plan staff, providers, provider organizations, accrediting organizations, disability-led and disability focus groups, community organizations, emergency management, emergency consultants, managers, planners, and importantly, federal and state legislators and health agencies, grant makers, and researchers. So what's in it for the health plan? Well, better member health and cost savings, especially for members who live with complex health conditions. So next slide. I anticipate that health plans most receptive to exploring and adopting these practices will include the ones that basically you're probably most familiar with already. Those, like the ones here in California, located in high hazard threats and disaster probability areas that have a strong sense of threat and operate from not if, but when risk of these reoccurring events. And they are plans that have a connection to people with high need, high risk, high cost, and high social risk circumstances. We always say those people who are disproportionately impacted by service disruptions. Next slide. There are also plans that offer the highest level of comprehensive coordinated care, helping people remain independent in their homes and offering community-based services. And those Medicaid and Medicare and Medi-Cal plans, the dual eligible plans, and the plans that offer long-term services and supports. So what's in it for all of you? Well, again, we need all the help we can get. We do it better in responding when we do it together. And also what's important is that recognition that this all needs advocacy, that it needs policy change to make a significant dent in getting these practices embedded and getting the help people need. And the other thing that's in it for you are contracting opportunities for your organization. Next slide. The methods involved in the project included 64 key informant interviews, working with 5 different organizations in kind of a learning consultation methods with 1 home health group, 2 health plans, and 2 health plan companies. And also reviewing online guidance from government, trade associations, and researchers regarding to emergency roles of health plans with members. And there wasn't a whole lot of that. And again, a final report that's called Health Plan Member-Focused Emergency Practices Roadmap. And I'll let you know how to get that shortly.
Hey, June?
Yeah.
This is Shana. We have a question in the chat box from Todd Holloway.
Okay.
And he asks if you can explain a bit about how ILCs and SILCs and public health partners can partner, that is, build a relationship with health plan providers.
I sure will, Todd. It's a good question. And I think I'm going to get there momentarily, but just to translate your question so everyone knows the abbreviations. ILC is Independent Living Centers, and SLIC statewide Independent Living Council. Hope I got that right. So yes, I will get the good question and I will cover that really shortly. Thanks, Todd. So these were the project activities. And next slide. The people interviewed are primarily people from health plans. And Shane, I think of a slide 11. People from health plans representing 24 different people.
Can we advance the slide to number 11, please? Thank you.
So as people with disabilities represented 14 different people. And some of these are duplicative counts because some interviewees represented more than one group. So we had contractors, we had consultants, we had disability-led organizations, researchers. Those were all the top groups that most people represented. Then we had emergency management at 7, government agencies 5, foundations and grant-making groups 3, and 1 accrediting and standards setting body. The report sections, next slide, our purpose and backgrounds, the role of health plan leadership. And the biggest section is case management, care planning, and care coordination. All of these sections have a great deal of detail underneath regarding what can be done, what can be strengthened, and examples of weak versus strong practices. So also member emergency communications, the role of contractor and vendor agreements and the specificity needed in those. The role, and this goes to Todd's question of community partnerships, plans, health plans participating with us in emergency focused partnerships, the training that needs to get done, as well as the just-in-time training and the policy change and other points of influence. And we'll talk that shortly. The final report, next slide, it'll be available, I'm hoping, late fall, early winter. If you want a copy, just send me email. And Shana or Cameron, if you could throw this in the chat, I'd appreciate it so people can just click on it. But all you need to do is send email to me. And my shortest email is jik@jik.com. That's Juno Indio Kilo at junoindiokilo.com. Just put final report or roadmap request in your email, and I'll make sure you get on the list. So I think I'll pause here for a second. Any questions so far?
June, this is Todd. Thanks for taking that first question. I had a feeling you might have a slide on it. I did want to check with you when it comes to home and community-based services as well. Are there plans that we can use to help have a unified understanding between independent living centers, which have one view of living in the community, our public health partners, and the health plans themselves? So to build the relationship, to make sure that the players who are involved with this this work, is there a plan or anything in the data that you came up with that could help us do that?
Yes, I think that the emphasis is really on community partnerships. So Todd, I know in your state of Washington, you have, some very strong community-based organizations participating with state and local agencies. So part of the strategy is to make sure that if health plans aren't represented at those tables, that you all invite them and really make it a very clear invitation. You might have to do it repeatedly, as well as to infuse this content in the meetings or advisory groups that some of you sit on with health plans. Health plans have a lot of advisory groups. So some of the content I'm going to talk about in terms of policy change and your potential ability to contract with health plans to help with member emergencies is content and ideas that you need to infuse in all of these meetings repeatedly so that they get traction, they get attention. Hope that helps for now, but we'll go back to that and belabor it more in a few minutes. Anything else? Okay. So next slide. So the targeted advocacy is something that we all need to work on, because what's detailed in the different report sections, in order to really have it be real, it needs regulatory and statutory support from state and federal government to really accelerate the adoption of these practices. And that policy change needs to occur in 3 areas: federal and state regulations, state contracts with health plans, and contracting opportunities with community-based groups. So, you know, this is not easy. It does take motivation, perseverance, and grit. It's not going to happen overnight. So first, we need federal and state regulations that look at and reinforce an emergency requirement, really a mandate for vendors of critical therapies and equipment and supplies, that when they're delivered, when the service is provided or the repair is made, that instruction is provided to users on how to activate their emergency procedures for the equipment or the service. Now, the responsibility here also needs to be with health plans as well as with the vendors and contractors. So here's some examples. I think these are things that we haven't looked at a lot in the past, but really need to think about how to strengthen this accountability. So first is really advocating for equipment and in provider sites. They have emergency requirements regarding providing information on, for example, with equipment. How long will your batteries and backup systems last? And how to extend this with limited or no power? How do I do that? How do I power my scooter when there's no power for 2 weeks? How to quickly get a loaner or repair when my device has been lost or broken? How do I begin the replacement process when it's not repairable, when it's lost? And with the provider sites, what do I do? Where do I go when critical infusion therapy sites are not available because of the emergency? So next slide. So providers need to give clear verbal and hard copy, including pictures, instructions in usable, understandable formats and preferred languages. And they need to really review this information at least annually to evaluate, is it accurate? Is it effective? Is it clear? Is it practical? Is it plain and understandable? And is it culturally appropriate? So that's a biggie that I think we really need to put in our advocacy bucket. Hasn't gotten the attention it needs. So the second big area is state contracts. Those are the contracts that all these health plans operate under in order to provide services in your state. So it really means integrating specific practices into these contracts, because these contracts are really pretty vague, at least the ones I've covered. And next slide. So here's an example of vague state contract language. It says, the state requires that Medicaid health plans have a well-documented emergency plan in place for specific members. So what does that really mean? What's well-documented? What specific members? And when are the plans reviewed? How often? Another example I don't have on a slide, but assist enrollees who reside in their home or family home with developing a disaster emergency plan for their household that considers the special needs of the enrollee. The problem? Special needs like what? That's, of course, that's one of our favorite terms that makes us squirm. And one last example, one of my favorites that talk about squirming, this makes me cringe. The care manager shall encourage the member to register with the state's emergency preparedness voluntary registry. The care manager will assist the member to complete the registration process. Yeah, exactly. So what's the problem? It shifts responsibility to other entities and relies on emergency registries that are unproven and most often unsuccessful in their response. So next slide. These are contracting opportunities, and these activities are really a health plan responsibility. They are covered in detail in the report. However, these responsibilities can be shared by contracting with community-based organizations. So I've got here 9 different examples of contracts that involve doing this well and right, but they're time consuming. And let's take the member emergency plans. Well, this can often be a multi-meeting experience working with people. It doesn't always happen quickly. It's time consuming. And sometimes it's really not an activity that health plan staff can take on and do well, particularly with the granular detail needed. But some of you've got this needed knowledge. You know how to use relevant and customized content. You know that the general emergency prep information is not always equally applicable to us. So you know how to translate, do you have the help you need, to helping people really create a specific helper list. There are people that you've talked to that agree to help when needed, to check on you, and maybe you check on them. Individuals you've talked to. and they've agreed to help. Plan also would include assisting people in signing up for local alerts, notifications, and also real evacuation and transportation planning. You know, it's not just, do you have an evacuation plan? Do you have a transportation plan? It's the granularity, the details like, can you exit your home without help or with help? Can you use every exit? You know, which exits need power to use? An elevator, a garage door opener, a gate opener. Can you roll or walk to a vehicle? Can you use a passenger vehicle? Or do you need an accessible vehicle? What's available to you? Can you leave the area without help? Those kind of questions, you know what they are, but they've got to be asked and specifically planned for. You know, can your device be folded up and transported in the back of a vehicle or empty space? And as many of us in California know, how do you plan for alternate power when the power is out? And the details involved in that. So that can be a contracting opportunity, as can life safety checks. And those are really coordinating with government partners, health plans, to check on people. And if they can't be reached, to maybe do an in-person check. Also on the list are institutional diversion and transition, avoiding nursing home placement or assisting members in moving back to the community, especially true after inappropriate, but all too common nursing home placement during and after emergencies. A few centers have these contracts and do the work well. Fourth, contract option idea, home delivery of food, water supplies, PPEs, personal protective equipment. Next, telehealth readiness, assisting people not only in obtaining devices, but how to use them and how to pay for the connectivity, Wi-Fi connectivity. Home modification and repair, another option. Debris removal, often forgotten, but certainly when accessible paths are blocked, these are not things that government does in their debris removal. They're focused on roads and highways, not sidewalks and ramps. Also,
June?
yeah.
June, this is Shana. We have a comment and a question in the chat box from Todd. June, do you see a role for subject matter experts in being at the table when deciding on and implementing contracts?
Definitely, because if you are able to negotiate a contract, you want to make sure that the deliverables are clear and that, the language in the contract makes sense and has the specificity for what, you can do. So absolutely, it's not a one-way activity. Contracting has to be mutually negotiated, so it's real, specific, and it's something that you can realistically do. Does that answer your question, Todd? Yeah.
Thank you, June. Yes.
Okay.
June, we have another question in the chat box from Sadie Martinez. Her question is, for life safety checks, who would you recommend as a partner for that role?
Well, I'd recommend a number of community-based organizations we, we can certainly play a role in contacting people if the phones are working, if emails are working, but we may also play the role in going to contact people when they're not answering phones, when they're not responding. And community organizations that are on top of their game would also have some priority list of who they would contact first. And they may be people who are at higher risk because maybe they live alone or they are very dependent on a direct service worker or an attendant, or they're geographically isolated and they don't have any kind of transportation. So really pre-thinking, as a community organization, in terms of the people you support, who are those who you would want to contact first? Because in an emergency, you often just can't sit down and start calling everyone. You need to think about what zip codes have been affected, or who's at highest risk. Sadie, is that what you were looking for? Kind of.
This is Sadie. Yes, thank you, June.
Okay, so the next contracting opportunity is huge. Navigating assistance with disaster recovery and the application process. We know this is complex. It's complicated. It takes forever. And it means dealing with service systems that are not always very accommodating to disability-related communication needs, accessibility needs, transportation needs, you name it. It requires a lots of time, lots of advocacy with an array of needed services and resources that may or may not have a whole lot of clues about disability. And last on my list would be working with health plans to make sure that their member emergency communication is specific and really offers information like, how do I reach the plan in an emergency? How can I contact my care coordinator? How do I access telehealth services, remote health services? How do I know where to go when I'm going for chemotherapy and that site's not open, not answering the phone? What do I do? How do I replace my medication or my equipment or my supplies? How do I get things delivered? How do I get mental health services? How do I see an out-of-network provider when my current provider is not available due to emergencies? So all these kind of things. How do I access my medical records for a new provider? So to wrap up and allow plenty of time for more questions and discussion, I think it's really critical that we recognize that these interventions that are detailed in the report and that I've just briefly mentioned here are much more likely to happen when they are in government statutory and regulatory requirements, which means oversight and enforcement. So our role, your role, and goes back to Todd's question, is get involved with health plans, acknowledge them as one of the key partners, invite them to your planning groups, to your community partnerships. Be clear about what you want to achieve. Your return on your advocacy and time invested. If you're sitting in on their advisory groups, be clear, put it on the agenda, follow up, make it real, make it happen, and make it measurable, and keep bringing it up. You want to see this stuff in contracts. You want to see them participate in your community partnerships. You want to see strong roles in what they're assisting their members with. And you want to see a stronger durable medical equipment and service vendor accountability. So this is a long-term advocacy endeavor. Once is never enough. It really takes staying power, relentlessness, pushing, keep repeating, and it takes grit. So in my mind, the time is now. We need to get this really moving. So next slide. So we've got a good 45 minutes to talk to each other. I'd like to hear your experience in this space, in the emergency context, working with health plans. What has worked? Do the health plans in your area have practices that help people in emergencies get equipment, supplies, transportation, help with their emergency plans? What have been your experiences, good, bad, successes, failures? What's strong, what's weak? And your questions. So I'm going to stop here and let's have a good discussion. Thanks.
June, Todd Holloway has his hand raised for a question.
Go ahead, Todd.
Thanks, June. I don't want to dominate the questions here, but I definitely want to share some of my experience as we're doing work here in Washington State, and I know that some of the similar work is happening in Oregon and down in California as well, as I talk to peers across the Pacific Coast and in the mountain regions. I see the players, and I'm thinking of the Aging and Disability Resource Centers and the Aging and Disability Resources, the case managers, the AAAs and folks like that. So the one thing I've never seen at the table in Washington that I can recall, other than some brief contacts through Aging and Disability Resource Centers, has been the health plan providers. But the amazing thing was, when I did see that, the ability to hold larger, meaningful meetings around a specific topic was doable. So as we go forward and your report comes out and we're able to see that information, do you envision a shift in the way we do things, from IL centers to public health to health plans, being able to leverage this kind of a relationship?
That's the intent. That's the objective and the goals. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think it's going to take a lot of our working on this continuously. So Todd, question for you: are health plans at your community in your community partnership groups? Are they part of your group?
This is Todd. No, at this point they're not. And I can see the advantage to doing it. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. So the tough part is seeing all the things that could be made better if these things were already in place. but having the time and the wherewithal to implement them. So what I feel like I'm seeing with your work, June, is a shift, and I don't want to use the term paradigm shift, but a shift in how we actually connect the people who need the services directly to that service. And a lot of that goes back to having people at the table, our motto of nothing about us without us, to be able to help drive the conversation and to leverage for health plans the exponential number of human beings out there that can help with creating those policies and procedures.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, some of this relates to also having on our question list, on our scripts, as we talk with people, who are struggling to get repairs of equipment or medication or supplies in emergency, have you touched base with your health plan? Have you talked? And what are they saying? Is it a question that we ask when we take our hotline calls? Is it a question that we're constantly asking as we focus on emergency response? And we're tracking this. The Red Cross, I see the Red Mary here, put in the spot. Does this come up in the work that your health service workers?
Hi, June, it's Mary. We do work with health plans, especially for durable medical equipment replacement or DME, and that, and medications, and that includes Medicare and Medicaid. But it clearly is a, I think it is not part of their general duties to think about emergency or disaster situations. It's always a sort of add-on. It really isn't a proactive approach. That's from our experience.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to shift the paradigm here, because we struggle. I know the Red Cross struggles to get people some usable equipment on the fly. We all struggle with that, with our assistive technology providers and programs, with our equipment loan closets. We struggle with helping people replace their lost prescriptions, and yet some of this just is easier for entities that have to do this, continually with people. So that's why this is a project that starts to, increase that role and that accountability from entities that can do this for some people much more easily than what we struggle with.
June, this is Shayna. Ivan had his hand up for a question earlier.
Go ahead.
Oh, hey, June. So just to go back to your other question about what is your interactions with these types of health care plans. I worked for Pierce County Human Services before working for emergency management in their community-based long-term care programs. Their health plan, and these are Medicaid recipients of in-home care, and it's a wonderful diversion program for folks who wish to remain or to receive care in their own homes rather than admission to a long-term care facility, adult family home, or other type of institutionalized setting. And in developing those care plans, they do assess for, caregiving hours, functional barriers in the home. And the bottom line goal is to make environmental modifications, work with Medicaid contracted providers to basically modify homes, rentals and personally owned, to make folks, ensure that they're thriving and that they can receive and have access to care in their homes successfully. And the scope of that work is, from folks who don't require a lot of caregiving hours per month to folks who require almost 24 hours of care 7 days a week. Part of that discussion does involve evacuation plans and emergency planning. So I think this is a really awesome discussion because while social workers do meet with those Medicaid recipients to go over any and all things that would make their receiving care in their homes successful, when it comes to discussing emergency planning, that section of that assessment is just a question about, do you have a plan? Do you have an evacuation route? And then working to modify the home if there are barriers. What I find is for folks who are low income or have less than adequate income, and they are in a home setting where environmental modifications are that kind of negotiating with the property managers have been challenging. We would come up with creative solutions, but I think this conversation is great because it shows that connection where you could work with other departments like emergency management or other partners to expand that plan even further beyond what human services is capable of and maybe partnering with other government departments. So I just wanted to provide that input, and I think it's a wonderful discussion.
Ivan, your comments make me want to highlight that I've seen a lot of health plans that ask some kind of vague questions about, have you talked to your attendant about emergencies? Or do you have a plan? But I found that what's really important is the more details about, can we give health plan workers, can we give our people in community organizations a script? Because the script helps us to remember the details. So it's not just that have you talked to your attendant, but do you have a backup helper list because for whatever reason, your attendant cannot get to you, or your family that's usually around is not around, and helps you think through all of the exits you have in your home, and can you do it independently? And if not, what is the plan? How would you get out? So I think some plans have a beginning question, but in working with some plans around the country on this project, they've acknowledged that they need better questions and a more detailed script so that they can not only be more specific with people, but also be more specific in how they, in their language, how they prioritize what they call stratification, or triage, who they're going to reach out first before, during, and after an emergency. So it's the details that, and there's a lot of this in the report, that not only health plans, but we as community organizations can begin to infuse and embed in how we're working with people. So the beginning questions are there, Ivan, but we really need to help people acknowledge the importance of the details underneath.
I completely agree, June. Thank you so much.
So how about the rest of you? What has been your experience with health plans? So I'll keep talking if I don't hear, if there's silence.
June, this is
Yeah.
Shayna. We have a nice comment in the chat box I'd like to read. It's from Todd to everyone, and he says, Ivan, we are so fortunate to have you at DEM in Pierce County as you bring this important issue. Excellent resources.
Good. Hey, Todd, DEM, what's that stand for?
Apologies and money to the acronym jar. This is Todd. That is Department of Emergency Management. Ivan comes from, has some public health background, which was ideal for our functional assessment service teams and for the DEM as he joined our team in Pierce County right at the beginning of the pandemic. So one thing I'd like to say, June, is that when I think about the functional assessment service team, something that you pretty much created in California and something that we're trying to ramp up here in Washington, what value this would bring, your work would bring to us being able to work with health plans, to be able to combat a lot of the insecurities and unknowns that we encounter for our people who have disability or access and functional needs. I think of the timing of this is great. But even with our work that you and I and others have done on the READY Act, as well as the Disaster Recovery Medicaid Act, these things will all benefit and be a benefit to this idea of using health plans who have much deeper pockets and are able to afford to do these things. Your question about what has been the experience with health plans, and I can say personally, the things that I've seen that have been so have had a remarkable benefit to people in general, that it's not just for people with disabilities or access to functional needs, but everyone, is the wise idea of putting literally health health benefits into the plans of free memberships to gyms and precautionary healthcare type of initiatives where you're getting gift cards to do your well check and those types of things. To me, this feels like it is almost in line with that, in that we are preparing people to prevent and not react to health disparities. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, your comments remind me of some things in the report. Two things. One is health plans have used rewards over the years to help members achieve desired health practices like no smoking workshops, or they've given out car seats, kids' car seats, or that kind of thing. So one idea is that, just like some health plans, well, Medicare, like the Silver Sneaker program, where they give free fitness center memberships, there is a way to begin to reward members who would work on their health, on their emergency plan. For example, create a 3D helper list, 3 different people on their helper list. And a lot of health plans, I know mine, I get this email all the time that says, oh, go watch all our, I think they call them well-volutions, or anyways, they're videos about different kinds of healthy behaviors. Now, wouldn't it be great if integrated in those videos was emergency content, emergency planning content? So it's treated not as something different or special or something that people will get to, but it's infused in a lot of the different wellness content. And for us in independent living, it's the same. Are we infusing this in our independent living skills training. So it's not just we're going to do a workshop during disaster preparedness month. It's just what we do all the time. My editorial comment.
June, this is Shayna. Sherry Burns has her hand up for a question.
Oh, Sherry, hi.
Hey, Jen, good to see you, and thanks for the presentation. Yes, many of the Centers for Independent Living are providing regular workshops and training on disaster preparedness and recovery. That's something that my organization's been doing for a number of years. And of course, as you know, that we have been blessed with Christina's leadership and working with our utility companies to put together a disaster access centers in our area. So most of the centers are participating in that and providing resources, batteries, hotel stays, education, training, assistance with completing home and personal preparedness plans with our consumers so that they are more prepared and connected with resources in the community. So that's been great. As far as working with the health plans, I think that, you know, those of us that have been providing transition services, community transition services from nursing facilities onto the community, have been addressing a number of these areas that you had on the checklist as part of a successful and safe transition. But I am hopeful with, at least in California, moving towards more opportunities for contracted services through CalAIM, that will be expanded. I was disappointed that emergency preparedness and recovery was not part of the in lieu of services package, but and they did have home modifications, and of course there's transition and other personal assistant services are listed there. So that lends itself potentially, I think, to contracts with home health, with the health plans to expand beyond that initial list of ILOS and case management services to include emergency preparedness and recovery. And I think that that you certainly have laid out a nice roadmap. I look forward to getting a copy of your more thorough roadmap of how we can expand those conversations with our health plans to include this area as part of the services that will help their beneficiaries be safe and sustainable in their living situations in the community.
Yeah, sure, you make some good points. I too was disappointed with the California look at, you know, restructuring things to make them, you know, more meaningful within health initiatives, health plans, the master plan on aging, you know, the whole area of in lieu of services. You know, these are all catchwords. Health plans like seem to have just discovered some of these things that we've talked about for decades in terms of some of this, but health plans have, you know, all these new, they call SDOH, social determinants of health. Well, those are some of the core things that we in independent living have been offering for and acknowledging forever, but you know, we reinvent our language all the time. So it's up to us to really remind them that there's social determinants of health, that they're in lieu of service language, that their population health projects and quality improvement projects need to incorporate these emergency details into into those endeavors, that, you know, it's just not for the website or their social media channels. And also, you know, your point about in California, we've, you know, spent a lot of time helping people to plan for power outages due to the public safety power outages, public safety power shutoffs. But you know, we still need to reinforce that we need to anticipate and plan for what Louisiana is going through right now, what Texas went through several weeks ago or months ago. And the plans too need to be our partners so that we in independent living are not the only people, you know, contracted to provide batteries, generators, hotel vouchers, hotel stays, fuel, and help people get through not only the short power outages, but the longer ones. And Sherry, can you clarify your term? You said disaster access centers. What do you mean by that?
So, yes, thanks, June. The Disability Disaster Access Centers, resource centers, what we call DDAR or DDARCs, are what we have set up through contracting with CFILC and the utility companies. Primarily is PG&E, but also Southern California Edison is involved as well to some extent. And so the participating centers for independent living that are working on this contract with CFILC and the utility companies have certain deliverables and certain requirements that we have in place to assist people with being prepared for public safety power shutoffs. And as you mentioned, you know, we do assessments with potential consumers to see if they have a need. We focus on those that have had experience in the past with multiple shutoffs because of the zone that they're in. If they're in those particular tier areas where they're vulnerable because of high winds, those kinds of things. So if they utilize some health equipment like CPAP or BiPAP machines, or they have a powered chair or scooter that needs to be charged, they have to keep medications refrigerated, all those kinds of things where that we require power for their well-being, then we dispatch to them, bring out a portable power unit, show them how it works, show them how it's utilized to keep it, you know, charged, all of those kinds of things. And they're set up that way. If somebody can't benefit from a portable generator device, then they are on our list to for us to assist with a hotel stay during the PSPS event. But part of that whole project also is just helping them with planning. I mean, we do a whole disaster preparedness plan with them so that they have all the things that you talked about, you know, who is their caregiver as a backup, that they have an evacuation route. All of those kinds of things are put into their plan if they don't already have one in place. And Christina can add more that I might have left out on that, but basically that's how the project works, and the centers that are participating are called Disability Disaster Access and Resource Centers for our communities.
It cracks me up. This is Christina, we say, we keep the lights going when it goes dark.
Yes, our byline.
Dark. But I was going to add, June, to the primary focus of this conversation with the health plans. I will say that the health plan that has supported our efforts in California too is Anthem Blue Cross. And what that support has looked like is buying us additional portable batteries for folks in different areas of the state, and ensuring that their members, their Medi-Cal members, have access to those resources that also live in high fire, wildfire areas. And Fortunately, because Anthem covers a variety of different counties across our state, it has allowed us to provide battery support in the southern portion of the state that doesn't currently have batteries provided to them or in partnership with their local utility company. So we've been able to do that. And we've also had some support from the American Red Cross to assist us in getting our program ramped up and running. This is year 2 of it, as you know. But I think that, you know, in terms of health plans and how, you know, this all goes together, there is so many moving parts, and it's hard at times to keep track of all of the different things and where we should make sure disaster and emergency is being inserted in the conversation. And one of the big things that our organization is currently focused on right now is providing recommendations and ensuring that disability, and specifically the independent living centers in our state, are not left out of what the California Department of Aging is shopping around as the hub and spoke model that is soon to become a part of the California Department of Aging plan, state plan. And so we're doing, or they're doing, a pretty big campaign to revamp what has been historically in the California Older Americans Act, and to create a hub and spoke model that puts the area agencies on aging in our state at the top of the model. And it's slowly coming together, and it's now included the Aging and Disability Resource Connections in California as a part of the hub of that model as well. But as you know, in California, you can't have an ADRC without an ILC as a core partner. And so we're really making sure that ILC language is in that hub and spoke model, not just overarching ADRC. And with that, for those of you less familiar with it, the Department of Aging has a PowerPoint that they use to start the conversation in their town halls. And part of that PowerPoint goes into what services, what the spokes would be from that hub. And one of those spokes is disaster and emergency. So making sure, again, that we're at the table pushing what we have, what we're doing, what makes sense, making sure that our level of expertise as folks that have been providing services out in the community know what the community's needs are if this hub and spoke model were to be implemented. And, you know, with the HCBS plan that is now rolling out in the states, and how states chose to invest in their home and community-based dollars to push new ideas or fund ideas that were maybe going out, were outdated, or extending those ideas and projects. I don't see anything specific yet in the area of disaster and emergency, but I think there's some opportunity to flesh it out in some of the HCBS areas of the plan. So looking at that very closely, but also I think that it's important to have conversations that what it really is it's connecting the dots. What I see is that we don't have any centralized group or person, and I don't know that one person could do it, but there's so many moving parts and there's so many great things that people are doing. And I think that while we're always working to cut down and prevent silos unintentionally occur because there's nobody responsible for connecting the dots. And so in California, we were really hopeful to have a master plan on aging advisor in the governor's office that could help us figure out what are all those things happening and who's tracking it. And hopefully we'll learn more about that today in a committee meeting that's happening this afternoon. But really, the health plans, the state, the CBOs, it's making sure that somebody is responsible for bringing all the stakeholders together to talk about what are you doing that's working and how do we continue to grow that and invest in it? Because there's some great work happening. I think it's just not everybody's at the same table at the same time, and we need somebody to help us bring that to fruition.
Yeah, really good points, Christina. And it highlights a couple of things for me. One is the example of Anthem Blue Cross is a good example of, grant making activities. And Over the years, they've also provided, in a report we did in 2018, an after-action report called Getting It Wrong, but they actually got some of it right. They would provide phone chargers for some of their members who needed that connectivity during power outages. So some plans provide
Yeah,
tablets.
exactly. I mean, it's some plans are doing cool stuff. And, you know, another thing Anthem has done with us is we have a program called Keep the Wheels Rolling, where we work really hard to ensure that durable medical equipment isn't going into landfills if it can be recycled and used by somebody else. And Anthem has helped us replace the batteries in those scooters and wheelchairs so that somebody else could benefit from that durable medical equipment. They funded that for us before. So, I mean, I think it's also at the end of the day, and my members could tell you, I'm always saying this, the most important is relationship building and cultivating those relationships. It doesn't just happen with a cold call and coming to the table and sitting there with nothing to say. It's about investing and engaging and being able to really use that relationship. I mean, I get called all the time because people want disability expertise. And at the same time, I want to be able to call those people when I need support as well.
Yeah, good point. It is all about the relationships and breaking down the silos. And your point about there are so many moving parts that, you know, it is a multi-pronged continual focus in inserting this continually in the conversation, expanding the silos. And your point about ADRCs, which are aging and disability resource centers, you know, I know in California, you know, you've reconfigured them in terms of what they can do in the disability and aging context, unlike other states where they may not be quite as popular. I think the other point you made for me to emphasize is we've got to look at this stuff not through an independent living centric lens, but looking at it as all of our community-based partners and, you know, government partners, public partners, so that we, you know, really dig our way out of the silo holes.
Hi, June. This
Hey,
is Shana.
Molly, thank you for putting that link in regarding 2018 Getting It Wrong, an indictment with a blueprint for getting it right. That was after action report that I wrote, Marcy Roth wrote, and Melissa Marshall, in terms of items we needed to say in 2018 that were often silent in, you know, government after action reports. And there is content in there about what health plans did that went well and went right, and also what went wrong. Thanks, Molly. Go ahead, Shana.
Thank you, June. This is Shana. We have a question from earlier from Alexandra Enders. June, her question is, have you seen any health plans or systems that include reminders for completing a preparedness plan in the same area as an advance directive and a portable medical order, with where to find resources for developing a preparedness plan? Then it's something that your doctor reminds you of during visits, especially an annual wellness visit.
Whoa. Alex, that's a great concept. We need to run with that one.
I love that one. I'm writing it down too. That's a great idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly a great demonstrated model for how we infuse this. So it's not separate. I mean, we're always talking advanced directives, but why aren't we always talking emergency plan next? Yeah, I like that. I like that.
This
a
is
lot.
Alexandra, June. It's
Yeah,
like, if it's in that same category of things to get ready for that you don't want to think about anyway, just like an advanced directive, you don't want to think about them. But when my primary doc is such a nag about it, I finally did them all. But it's like, it would be great if your doctor nagged you about this too. So let's talk about this some more.
give me an example of how you got nagged on this.
How I got nagged?
Yeah,
It's one of the things in the annual wellness visit that she has to check the box on, it's, you don't have your advanced directive in your my chart, you don't have your post in your my chart. It's like, so get them in. And so I did it, but I think that it points to the fact of what you were discussing earlier. There needs to be a much more detailed template that can be used. I'm telling people to do that without a good template in place. Be interesting.
yeah.
This is something that might be interesting to talk to. We can do strategy on this one, but with National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, might be very interesting because they're into all of this advanced directive and all this stuff. It's like getting them to think about it in the same box might be some of what Christina was talking about, breaking down the silos.
I just want to comment that this speaks to the importance and the value of a detailed template. And for me, one of the more important books I read that influenced my life is the Checklist Manifesto, and how important it is that unless it's in a script or on a checklist, it's forgotten. So I think really interesting concepts that to run with. So I wanted to let y'all know, because we got started late, that just give you a real brief intro. Next month, we're going to focus on really peer-to-peer sharing around, there's an app for that. And that's related to both on the personal preparedness side, personal side, and on the responder side, how we work with people. So it's a chance for you all to share your favorite apps. In November, we're going to hear from a panel of people who are power dependent and have done a lot of personal planning and surviving some of these longer term power outages. Lex Frieden, Laura Everson, and Mary Lou Breslin are on that panel, as well as I know many of you will want to contribute to that conversation in November. And in December, we're looking at a possible focus on, putting action behind our emergency values and talking about our favorite emergency gifts that we give, maybe that are under $10, under $20, under $50. So that's kind of a fun holiday, focus. But, do we think about giving emergency gifts when we've got people that we think about that don't need anything? So just a highlight of calls to come. So Sheena, do you have a poll you need to put up?
Yes, just a moment.
Yeah, we really want your feedback and about today and how it went for you. And we always work on making these calls better and stronger, and helps us look for funding too. So
June, the poll has been launched.
okay. And anybody who can't do a poll, Shannon, can you also put up the link, the Survey Monkey link for anyone for who that might not be totally accessible?
Of course.
Thanks.
This is Megan. I'm happy to put up the Survey Monkey if you'd like to read out the poll questions for folks, Shana.
I'm going to start reading the poll questions. Question number 1, please rate how helpful this month's speaker forum topic sessions was for you. Your choices are not helpful, okay, fair, good, and very helpful. Question number 2, please rate your opportunity to participate in the coalition discussion. Your options are poor, fair, okay, good, and excellent. Question number 3, please rate the accessibility of the coalition meetings. Options: poor, fair, okay, good, or excellent. Last question, question number 4, how likely are you to attend a future Disaster Strategies Coalition meeting? Options: very likely, somewhat likely, or unlikely. I'm going to end the poll. Looks like we have 100% participation.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us this month. We'll glad to have you, and hope to see you all again next month. And thanks for your excellent participation.